Hi there! If you're anything like me, you've probably found yourself in this situation. You look forward to your art time all day, and finally you're home from work, or get the baby down for a nap, and are able to sit down to paint. Your space is ready, you flip to a fresh page in your sketchbook, pencil in hand, and you have no idea what to paint. Maybe you scroll through the mountains of reference pictures you saved on Pinterest. Maybe you search for a tutorial on YouTube. Maybe you lose your motivation and claim defeat. In this video, I'm going to share my favorite exercise when I don't know what to paint. This is something I return to over and over, and it never fails to help build my confidence and teach me more about my process and materials. Are you ready to see what it is? Okay, I know geometric forms and still lifes and
the fundamentals
sound boring and stuffy, but this single exercise can level up your technical skills, and you can modify it in ways that generate new ideas and can transform into your next work of art. In learning to paint a basic sphere, you're developing skills in assigning values and creating gradients. You're learning what works and what doesn't work for you. You can hone your own unique process without worrying about all the extra variables that go into a painting. Once you've perfected a simple sphere, you can use this exercise to explore and play. When you buy new materials, this is a great way to see how they fit in with your established process. If you want to use a new medium, painting your sphere will help you get a handle on it. You can start solving the problems in your paintings with these spheres. If you're wondering how to paint a certain color, texture, or light effect, practice on a sphere. In a future video, I hope to tackle textured spheres. Here, I'm going to explain some essential sphere ingredients and demonstrate my preferred technique for painting one. First, let's talk about the different factors to consider when rendering a sphere. The terminator is the point where your object stops receiving direct light. On a sphere, the terminator divides the object in half. It can be helpful to imagine a rubber band wrapped around the middle of your ball. Apart from the highlight, the light tone is the lightest part of your sphere. It takes up the bulk of the lit side of your object. As we get closer to the terminator, this darker but still lit zone is called the halftone. Once you start working with color and texture, the halftone can do a lot of the heavy lifting. The shadow side of your sphere is called the form shadow. Since our object is round, the area between light and shadow is a gradient. The form shadow on a cube would have harder edges. The cast shadow is a shadow caused from one object blocking the light from hitting another one, in this case the table. Cast shadows only appear on a lit surface. The shadow side of an object isn't usually black because light bounces around in a scene. The reflected light in this sphere is caused by light bouncing off the table and hitting the ball. If this was in color, you might see some of the table's color reflected in this shadow. The core shadows are areas that receive the least amount of reflected light. You typically see core shadows along the terminator, also where the cast shadow is reflected on the sphere. In this drawing, I'm imagining the ball with dark surroundings, so the upward-facing side would be getting less reflected light from the table. When two objects are touching, it's hard for light to bounce around between them. This place where they meet is called the ambient occlusion. I try to save my darkest paint for this small area. The highlight is the lightest part of the sphere. It doesn't face directly toward the light source. Instead, imagine where the light source would hit the sphere, and where your eye line hits the sphere. The highlight falls somewhere between these 2 points. Now I'll walk you through my process for painting a sphere. I start by tracing a circle on my paper, and then using a ruler to draw a table edge behind. I like to keep this line in the lower half of the circle. I choose 2 points directly across from each other on the circle, and draw an arcing line connecting them. This is the terminator, and it immediately defines the form of your object and the direction of the light source. Next, I draw my cast shadow. This is the shape of the terminator projected onto the table, so I make sure it's an ellipse. Before painting, I mix 3 puddles of paint with different dilutions. I start by painting the lit side of my sphere with my most watery paint. Once I paint to the terminator, I use a darker paint mix to fill in the shadow side. While this is still wet, I pick up my thickest paint to charge in my core shadow and connect the ball to its cast shadow. When my first layer is dry, I go over the whole painting with a very dilute wash. I make sure to avoid the highlight. Before it dries, I soften the edge around my highlight. For my next layer, I paint the whole sphere with clean water and charge in deeper tones for my form shadow and core shadow. I paint the rest of my painting using a wet-on-dry technique. I bounce between different areas that need darker tones. I paint onto dry paper and blend out the edges that need to stay soft. My last 2 steps are adding my darkest and lightest values. I add the ambient occlusion under the sphere. I let the edge touching the sphere stay sharp, but blend out into the cast shadow. I ended up painting over the highlight while I was layering. So I go back in with some white gouache, then soften the edges. A more traditional approach requires painting around this area more carefully, or masking the highlight before painting. Do whatever you prefer. So here are the spheres I painted today. I like some more than others, but they all taught me something. Just in doing this handful of small paintings, I've given myself some new ideas for my next projects. I encourage you to try this exercise for yourself. Once you find a process that works for a simple monochromatic sphere, start exploring and getting creative. I think you'll be surprised at how much your painting improves. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!